So yeah, I've been on this kick for a couple of years now where I'm a computational designer. I would say at the heart of everything I do. And there's really three pieces that you need. And that is you need to know coding, computation, algorithms, all that. You also need the knowledge, the engineering knowledge on how stuff, works, how to design stuff, the equations, the processes. And then the other piece that you need though is data. And without all three of those pieces, you can't really build like crazy workflows. And you're kind of in a situation where you're like Ganondorf looking for, I don't know how many Zelda people are on here, but this guy is always looking for that third piece of the Triforce so he can take over the world. So I think if we find the data piece, which we're going to talk about today, we can do some really cool things. So yeah, we've kind of sucked at data so far in the industry. I think we start with the paper age. When I started, I had a good senior engineer, but he was very paper oriented and his desk looked something like this. And of course, that's not going to work for automation at all because the computer has no access to any of that data or any of those mockups on drawings and PDFs. Then we kind of hit this desktop age, which I guess we're kind of in now a little bit still, where we have these clunky big files. It's kind of hard to access. We're not the best, even though, right, Revit promised the eye in BIM. It still just hasn't panned out quite as we'd liked. And then we kind of hit this internet age where we started using Dropbox, the stuff that was talked about a little bit earlier with how can we start sharing these files on the web. And even then, I feel like we've still fallen a little short. So some reasons, right? So again, bulky files, everything's in these silos still. It's hard to share the data, version issues when you're updating. There's also a lot of people problems, I think, in it. So little cooperation across teams. A lot of times there's skill gaps. What do I do with the data? How do I access the data? How do I even run something like Revit? And then this already came up, right? We have the security and IP concerns. So there's a lot kind of to overcome to really utilize the data. And Autodesk has made a big effort in it lately. And we saw this, so it was something that showcases the stuff that they've been doing with geometry. Is I got scanned at a conference like in 2019. I could never get it into a Revit project until I think Revit 2023 or maybe even 2024. But now I get to put this guy in Revit models and use them for other fun stuff. So pretty easy. Another thing we've seen is the parameter service. So again, let's take the parameters off of our desktop in these, right, these text files. You start sharing it. It's not consistent. Let's put that stuff into the cloud for better management and organization of it. And then we have the data exchange, and that is what we're going to talk about today. And this is how we can start share data in a little bit more granular level. And yeah, so again, I'm Sean, and that's what we're going to talk about is looking at all these data exchange connectors and how to move data around. And we're going to focus all these on kind of MEP workflows.
I need your 3D person and put him in all our renderings.
Yeah,
it looks like the general consensus is that people have heard of it, they may have tested it, but nobody successfully got it to work.
Wow, yes. So this will come up too. It's definitely an early development, but yeah, so we have all these things. So at the center of this is our engineer, right? And he has to talk to the architect. He has to talk to people in the field. We're getting to the point where we're talking to fabricators, right? We're talking to construction workers, owners, and then of course VDC. So there's just a lot of communication going on and a lot of exchanges of data. So yeah, this whole class is going to focus on making those connections with those different MEP workflows. And yes, it is in beta, so it might be a little turbulent. I've had quite a few conversations with the team. That's one of the nice things about doing a presentation at AU or something like this, is you get a little bit more access to their team. And so I've been a very active participant in the development of some of the stuff, and they have listened to a couple things I've said, which we will cover at the very end. So today, this was an AU class that it was a 90-minute session. So we're scheduling this one for about 40 minutes. So I did have to cut some stuff out. Yeah, we're cutting it in half. But I think in the board, there's a link to the class if you want to see all that. The handout is actually the best way to probably try to copy this stuff step by step. I put a lot of time into it. I think it's pretty good. some of the videos and stuff I'll probably cut through pretty fast. So if you're really looking to copy what we're doing and play with it, I would go to the handout that's on the Autodesk. Yeah, we're going to talk about Data Exchange 101. We're going to look at how it can connect to Power BI and some of the workflows with that. We're going to look at automated coordination kind of between the architect with the fire dampers, and then hopefully we have some time to look at some of the new nodes that were released even since AU last year. So learning objectives, right? So discover how Data Exchange can help us overcome some of the issues, discover new ways to create some data exchanges and share them, and then explore various use cases for Data Exchange. So I will challenge all you guys to come up with a use case, and I'd love to end with us kind of sharing some other ideas and use cases, because I'm still questioning use cases and really curious about, the next evolution of all this. Also, there is a data set, so you could scan this. I don't know if you want to put this in the Miro, if you can, the QR code, but there is a data set up on GitHub, and you can go ahead and download that. And it has some of the Dynamo scripts on there and some fun stuff like that. You can get the statue of me, I think, would be in there somewhere.
Well, I got it.
Awesome. So let's start off with what data exchange is 101. Kind of, remove some of the smoke and mystery about this thing. So we had fun with this. At the presentation, I don't have Brian with me to do it's a file. No, it's a database. No, it's actually a data exchange. So the data exchange is not a file. It's really not a database, even though it kind of is. It's really this own thing. It's kind of weird. If you look at it on Autodesk Docs, it actually has 0 file size. So that's interesting. But here's the definition from Autodesk. Great. So data exchange is a way to capture granular data, so pieces of your project, and share those across apps, different companies, with trust and high control. So there's a big security issue in this. I don't want to give my whole model to somebody. I just want to give part of my model to, the stair fabricator. I think was the example Autodesk has been using a lot. So this is kind of it in action. So here we are in ACC. And if you go in here, you can see there's a little version control, but this is a data exchange with pretty much all the geometry from that Snowden's Tower model. And then, another data exchange that I just captured some of the energy model stuff and put it in here. So it's kind of cool. You can view it. There's actually been some enhancements in the viewing, and this is actively being developed. So something cool about this too is now like a senior guy could get in here and review some of the stuff without opening up Revit. So pretty simple interface to start looking at stuff. So yeah, these are all kinds of data exchanges that we did for this presentation. So there we had we won't get into that workflow, but there we had like a assembly that, would be prefabricated so we can get that geometry back into Revit. Again, so the big heart of data exchange is these things, connectors. And so the connectors can either read or they can write. A lot of them can do both. And I like to think of it as it's a little bit like Ben and Jerry's, right? So there's a whole bunch of different flavors. There's a whole bunch of more flavors that are even done that aren't listed here. There's a whole bunch of new flavors coming in the roadmap, but whole bunch is, right? You can see you can just get into all these different programs and pull information out, even programs that aren't necessarily Autodesk specific. Right, so there's kind of this autonomy of them. So most of them can write. Some of them can only read. So for example, Power Automate can only read. Power BI can only read. But most of them are kind of bi-directional. But what this really does is if we think about going back to, our engineer at the center, is it lets us communicate a lot better with all these different programs and be able to exchange information back and forth. So one guy could be doing a facade in Rhino or something, in that. We can send up, make dashboards of Power BI, use a detail, get really detailed down to the bolt and inventor for assembly. And really, it just really opens up all these different swim lanes and ways to use data and exchange data. So to get started, there is quite a bit like pre-checks to do. So one of the things that you need to do is you do need to have the project on the cloud. You do need to add the apps. So we'll get into this a little bit more. You do need to have permission to be in that project. And then you do have to have a license to the software. If you're writing, I believe you can read without a license to ACC, but to write to ACC, you need a license. And then the connectors. So that's all the stuff that you had to do. The first part is all the stuff that you had to do inside ACC. The second part is what you have to do with the connectors. So it's going and downloading the connectors, having the license to that software. So if I want to use Rhino connector, I need a license to Rhino. And then go ahead and download the connectors themselves for each individual software. I'll probably skip this one, but this was just some tidbits. It's probably old at this point, but just some stuff from the development team, right? There's release notes and a whole bunch of stuff in there, but just stuff to kind of help you guide through. So then my story is about going through this for AU. So first thing that happened is, I guess I am not important enough at IMEG to be an admin. So I had to go out to my VDC guy and ask him to add those connectors to our ACC hub. And he was skeptical. He's really worried about tokens and the cost. There's no cost right now for the data exchanges, but he was a little skeptical. Luckily, I convinced him though, and then you can see once they're added, you can see that they're activated by going to the apps there. And you can see on the left panel, the apps windows highlighted, and then you can see which ones are activated for your hub. Another problem, so this was my co-speaker at AU, Brian. Ends up, we were trying to work together to do this. He took on the fabrication things. He's doing a lot of cool stuff with conduit, automation and all that, but he did not have access to the project. So again, I had to give him access to the project. And there he is, the second to the bottom. And you can see there's a lot of Autodesk people on here. So a lot of people contributed to this class and us exchanging stuff. So yeah, this is just kind of a quick video of just going how easy it is. I know it seemed complicated by list, but it's pretty easy just to go and go to the App Store, right? There's how you can download the data exchanges. Because they're in beta, sometimes you have to go to the link to get them, but pretty easy to get started, but it is a few steps. This has actually changed. They've consolidated quite a bit too. But then, yeah, so this is installing the data exchange for Revit 2024 connector. So it's that pretty much process for all of them. Again, there is a free trial. So for example, I did not have a trial or a license to Inventor, but I was able to use the free trial, right? They're pretty quick over there at Autodesk. I think Reinho gave me like a month, where Autodesk was pretty quick. So yeah, that's kind of 101 about data exchange. Does anyone have any questions before we move on?
Are you able to connect with Teams or other ecosystems?
Perfect.
Or just the ones you listed.
Yes, so with the Power Automate, which we will get into in this first example, we can connect to that ecosystem. And we have some examples just for that.
And then the other, which Jason hopefully is adding to the mural, do you need to add these to each project or just the project time?
So I think everything that I've covered so far is just doing for the hub to kind of get started. You would have to create a new data exchange for each project. So I think that will be answered as we go through these examples.
Awesome. Yeah,
so let's look at how Revit data can connect to our Microsoft tools and some workflows for that. So some of the problems that we wanted to do is we have senior engineer, and you ask him, hey, let's get in a Revit, and he walks away because they don't like Revit. So we're going to look at that, how we can get some data. This is one that always pops up on MEP, the good old cat and mouse game between the coordination between rooms and spaces. So we'll look at that. Another thing we wanted to look at was kind of the data problem, right? So collecting data from multiple projects in a standardized, structured way. We did an audit on all of our Revit projects at IMEG, and it was a disaster. It's very messy, very stinky. So we're gonna look at that. Something I wanted to bring up is I love this game, by the way, Certigo. It's like a capture the flag game. And you have like these characters 1 through 9, I believe. And each one kind of has its own special ability. For example, the spy can kill like the number one person, the scout can defuse the bombs, or the miner, so forth. But I think each the data connectors, a lot of them kind of have their own special abilities that you can do things that you can't necessarily do with all the other connectors. So I'm going to try to hit that in this. So the first thing is getting started with the Microsoft tools. It kind of all really goes through Power Automate. And they are some templates to get started really quick. So you can just search like Autodesk in Power Automate and you will see the templates. That's a good way just to get started. But our first example is going to look at notifications when rooms change. So, and going through Microsoft Teams. So the solution to this is we see that the architect would create a data exchange from their model. They can make a view filter to make that process pretty easy. Then they would host that data exchange up to the cloud, up to the hub. And then whenever that is updated, that data exchange, automatically Power Automate would fire a message in Teams. So this could be like a Teams specific channel and set a planner task to go and review those changes. So this is the demo. I might skip over some of this pretty quick. It's just the videos are kind of long for this time frame, but we can get going. So pretty much just open up. This first part is how to create the data exchange. So you have to create data exchange from a 3D view. So here I'm just duplicating my own 3D view. Something interesting is right in a 3D view, rooms and spaces do not show up. So how do they get in a data exchange? Well, they're kind of there by default. The catch is you need like one piece of geometry to make them show up by default. And I didn't want to take the whole model to make the data exchange too big. So in this situation, I just did the floors. Oh, and here we are doing it through ACC to publish and create the data exchange. And to do that, you have to publish the 3D view. And then from ACC, you can actually create the data exchange. So that's what this example does. Oops. Let's skip ahead a little bit. Oh, that was not bad. So then, yeah, so here's our published view right here. And then if you go there to the published view and go to the little ellipse, you'll have this nice button that says, hey, create a data exchange from this 3D view. And then you have to pick a folder. This is going to be very repetitive because we do this a lot. And it's pretty much the same workflow no matter which software you're in, where it's kind of pick the hub, pick the folder, name the data exchange, and then send it up to the cloud.
Yeah, so what you see is what you get. Yeah, you export from 3D view, and in data exchange, whatever was visible within that view is what you're gonna retrieve.
Yeah, so then you can see, right, it's spinning right there. It does take some time to get up to the cloud, but that is good. So now the next one is looking at, so this is Power Automate if you're not familiar with it. So this is kind of talking about two, where we can go to templates and just simply hit Autodesk as a starting point. So here we're going to start off with the Teams notification when a data exchange. Oh, the one I didn't look for didn't exist. So the default ones was when a data exchange is created. I don't want that. I want when a data exchange is updated. So we are going to build this one from scratch. So here we hit the flow, we type in the flow name. And then we search Autodesk for triggers. So this is what starts this flow to happen. And here we can see when a data exchange is uploaded, then trigger the flow. So again, different UI, but same steps of here we're picking our hub, then we're going to the project, and then we're picking the folder. Like I said, it's going to get really repetitive. They're actually looking at ways to kind of speed this up. I don't really know how they could do that yet, but maybe some AI or something in there. But So now we selected the data exchange. So now you can go through and there's tons of stuff to do in here, but here we go to Autodesk. And now I want to get the details of that data exchange. And then again, I have to go to the folder, I have to pick it. Kind of annoying, kind of repetitive. But and I will say this, I think the conversation came up. One of my criticisms of the tool so far was like, I want to set this up and I want to make my end user not have to do this part anymore. So I've been kind of talking to them and seeing how you can just speed this process up for an end user's like
Like just
reuse all
remember
the
these
logic.
settings.
Yeah, remember these
just remember
settings
these
are
settings.
just like, obviously if it's a new project, it's going to be a couple different settings, but like all of this stuff, like just let the end user only set the minimum required stuff for their project. And I think you can save you can save and share Power Automate workflow.
Do you need to be an admin to access this level of coordination?
You know, I don't. Admin in what? Microsoft account?
It just says, do you need access? What access do you need for Power Automate?
I think you do need like a premium subscription, but I don't think there's anything more there. Let me catch up to the video real quick.
Sure.
So here we're actually writing the message that we're going to post in Teams. So I try to put some funniness in here where it's like, hey, room project, this project name, because all this data is now in that data exchange. I have the project name, right? The architects changed the rooms again with a frustrated face. And then this is the whatever version. So it could get pretty high with those darn architects. What were you saying, Dana?
I was just gonna say, how often are you finding the frequency of publishing?
From you, quite a bit. I'm kind of out of production work, so I don't really see it that much, but it's one of the main frustrations that we have with users and working with spaces. So this was the number one problem, is coordinating room changes with spaces that our users don't want to use spaces for.
Would you suggest daily if there's a lot of changes going on?
So that there is no, so this just runs. So this is the beauty of this. This just runs when an update is happening.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that's
if
the
they
whole
see
thing.
that there's updates to the model, then it will automatically just publish this out. That's fantastic.
Right. So you'll see it. So it'll post in Teams in that channel, right? So I did it to my project channel. It'll post in there, hey, the stupid architects changed their stuff again. No, architects are stupid. Just get a little frustrated. And then this part is
we're actually going to change things.
So in this part, we're actually going to create a task in our Autodesk task to say, hey, go review this. And I think there's like, it automatically sets a time limit on it and everything. So there's so much flexibility in Power Automate to kind of set this up how you want. And again, it's fairly easy. I found it, there's an Excel example where it's a lot more confusing, I think. But I was able to work through it. If I can work through it, you guys can work through it.
Well, it's interesting that you can't save these out as templates if there's these dynamic content pieces that you can add in, right? I mean, it seems like it would be perfect for a template piece.
Yeah, I think you kind of can, because you can save it and share it. I just haven't. I should say the caveat right now too is this is not a workflow that like we've implemented at iMEG. Like I don't think it's quite there yet. Me being an early adopter, I've just been playing around with it to see what's possible. So yeah, you know how like we're all on legacy stuff. I think back, I think maybe a few years this will kind of take on when everyone's in Revit 2024 at a minimum, but even 2025 and stuff like that. So just to throw that out there, this is not a workflow that we're actually using at iMEG. But yeah, so that's our flow there. So again, we do the message and we create the task and planner where we need to get the current time, and then we add a couple days to the time to make sure it's reviewed in time. So yeah, then you go ahead and save the flow and you want to make sure you test it. This was actually kind of tricky because sometimes to test it, you need to at least activate it once. So I had to create a project that had rooms updated to be able to test it. So that was just kind of weird. But yeah, there we go, successful flow. And then I guess I put it in a later slide. What did I put down here? Yeah, so there it is. So there's the tasks, right? So here is my I put in mechanical tools. I have a funny slide later about people. I made some people really mad. But then you can see these tasks are automatically created. And I believe somewhere there is the notification. And here's the notification in Teams saying those rooms and the project changed again. So yeah. So next one is data extraction. So this one I just want to look at, hey, can I get data from Revit and get it into an Excel? And this would be kind of cool because you can set up views to be very particular on what is in that view for the data exchange. So just for sake of time, I think I will skip some of this because again, it's creating the data exchange. So I'll leave it because this one is creating the data exchange through Revit itself. So there I have the energy model. Here I am changing to show the analytical surfaces. So again, whatever is in the view is what's going to show up in the data exchange. The caveat is spaces and rooms just automatically show up. I think like levels too do that behavior. Yeah, so it looks like this video is just on setting it up. And then this one is creating the data exchange. So you go up to the ribbon, click data exchange. This window pops up. Again, same thing. You're going through the folders. You're selecting it. You can actually filter stuff by categories. So another way to filter is by view or by that drop down with the categories. It makes you save the project before you create the data exchange. But I think this way is a little bit easier than the way of going through ACC that we did in the first example. So with the ellipse, we can see, we can update the exchange. We can select the elements in the exchange. There's some stuff to do there. And then sure enough, there's our data exchange on ACC now. So in this one, another Power Automate workflow. Here I skip the steps of filling all this stuff in because I told you it gets very repetitive. But now we're going to look at writing the stuff to Excel. So the biggest this was a lot harder than I expected it to be. And again, here we're just going down to the projects to get the properties. So right now we're extracting the properties that we want from the data exchange. The big thing that threw me through a loop here is to write to Excel. You have to use a table, and it's kind of restricted in the way that, like, I can't just rewrite. It like wants to append everything to the bottom of the table rather than just overriding it. And there's some really complex workflows out there to say like just append the new stuff. But in this case, I don't even remember what I did. In this case, I created a new worksheet to get new data. So every time this data exchange would run, you would actually get a new sheet with the new versions of data. Does that make sense? So when data exchange runs, we create a new worksheet and then we create a new table. Then we have to get the table. And then you have to do this. So it's kind of like iterative. So it's kind of like a while loop. So here I'm going to my Excel, my template Excel file. But that while is like a while loop. So it doesn't just, it's not like simple like Dynamo. It actually like is looping through like each row of parameters. So again, I would go, if you really want to see the details of this one, I would look at the handout. It's written out there in the handout pretty well. Yeah, definitely not the most intuitive thing. So to make this repeatable would be huge. So yeah, here you can see there's just to make the table range. It's just It's just not intuitive, if I'm honest. So we will jump ahead a little bit for time's sake. That is it.
Well, we have a few questions.
Okay.
First off, before the question, Andrea, thank you, says Microsoft Business Basic allows Power Automate. So you
There you
don't
go.
need
Thank
any
you so
special
much.
things. Yes, thank you for that. Also, it looked like there was different data exchanges per each version of Revit, correct? Do you need like a specific Revit
Yeah, it's
version
like
for the
having
data
an
exchange?
add-in. Yeah,
Mhm.
so there are different versions for each version of Revit.
And when does that, do you know when that starts? Probably 23.
I think 23, yes, 23.
23 and newer.
Don't
Maybe
hold me
22?
to it. I don't think it was in
But there's
22.
different, you have to get the add-in for each version.
Yes. And I might be lying there too. I believe it was shipped. This is not my fault for being confusing. I believe it was shipped natively with 23. I believe you have to
Okay.
download the connector for 24. And then it kind of acts like an add-in. You download the connector and then it's, you know, it just kind of shows up in the ribbon
Right.
under the collaborate tab. So yeah, and just to wrap up kind of this workflow, this is where I accidentally wrote this message whole bunch of times in a public Teams channel. And you can see for this channel to be useful, it needs to not have useless messages. It looks like Power Automate has a glitch. Is something turned off? Can someone turn this off? So I got a nice message from somebody else saying, Sean, what the hell are you doing? Just be careful. That's the moral of the story there. This last one. So this is probably my favorite example and probably the favorite example from the AU class. And that's with Power Automate. So I'm probably gonna speed up a little bit. Yeah. Here we're looking at Power Automate to get stuff into Power BI. One of the issues is the space geometry doesn't come through. So Dynamo Superpower is being able to get that geometry and create your own data exchange. So this is kind of, you have to create parameters, which is weird, but this is how you do that. Then this is a really simple example of saying, take the surface from Revit, add this parameter to it. I think it was just ID, and then create this data exchange. This is the convoluted, not convoluted, but this is the big workflow where we get all the spaces, we do it by phase, we create a dictionary with all the parameters. We then have to recreate those parameters. The team is looking at fixing that. And then we create the data exchange. Yeah, so this just goes through it, the video, all the details, but I will let you guys look at that inside the thing, inside the handout. But then we go ahead and go into Power BI, and you can see that you get the geometry in there, and then you can make tables. There was an issue at AU where I was trying to color code this stuff, and we are actively working on it. So I could say, all right, give me all the ones on this VAV box or this air handling unit, and make all the rest transparent and make those ones red. So a lot of cool stuff, and this is something I'm really excited about. And again, with Microsoft, there's so much stuff you can do. Yeah, so outcomes, again, we kind of hit all that stuff. Work together, I think, a little bit. So the next one is looking at dampers. So the problem, right? I just need fire rated walls. Solution one, where Waldo. No one wants to go around on floor plan and look for all the fire rated walls. Solution two, right, it's a little bit turbulent, and that is where they stuff all the stuff, the architect stuffs all the stuff in a Revit model, and then it's up to us to figure out how they name fire rated walls. Did they actually use the parameter? Are they just using a detailed line? A better way might be, even a slide that my 3-year-old could go down, is to use a data exchange that just contains the fire rated wall. So here the architect would create the data exchange from their end. Within Dynamo, I would then consume that data exchange, and then I'd take the duct geometry from my model, and then I'd place the fire dampers. Again, for time's sake, this is again going through that process of creating the data exchange. There it is up on the cloud. Then in my end, as the engineer, I would load in the data exchange. So this is loading it in. And then, I think Dana, I'm sure built this script where it's placing up, finding ducts and wall intersections and then placing the fire damper. That's essentially what the
You know
script
me
is
too
doing.
well.
Yes. And it cuts out so much with the link models and stuff. Which they just added the link model nodes too. But this is just a much quicker way, I think, to doing it.
I have a video
than...
on Monday coming out about that.
Nice. So then we can debate next time we're together on which way is better and quicker. But
Yeah,
this is definitely a
absolutely.
collaboration kind of type of way, right? And then the idea is if we set all these up, I can just sit back, relax, smoke some cigars, and have fun. Cool. So yeah, let me just cover this part real quick. Sorry, I did the last one really quick. The Power Automate stuff takes quite a long
That's so
time.
great.
Yeah, the new Dynamo nodes. So they got this stuff. If you got the Autodesk data model is new, so they have nodes for that. This all uses the GraphQL, which is, I'm going to try to explain that really quick. And the other cool thing is they're starting to get to work with Dynamo Player. Right now it's read only, but for example, in the fire damper example, it'd be really nice if you could do that through Dynamo Player without having the end user have to open up that Dynamo graph and get scared, because that's what end users do. The data model is really interesting, right? It's this idea of being able to select, kind of share this whole idea of granular data across different platforms. And the data model is really the foundation for all that. The GraphQL, I'm still working on trying to explain this. So the GraphQL, the other option is REST API, which is like the old way of doing it. GraphQL was created by Facebook in 2015, so it's fairly new. And it's just a much faster querying thing. I asked ChatGPT to tell me the difference, because in a way that I could understand. And it came up with this crazy thing about food orders. Yeah, I will not read that out loud. This is my interpretation of my simple explanation. So it's really about how the filtering is done. So with GraphQL, the filtering is done more on the cloud side. Whereas REST, all the filtering is done on the PC side. Therefore, a lot more information has to go through, our wires. A lot more ones and zeros have to go through our wires with the REST. So the GraphQL is faster for that reason. And meaning you can like specify, I don't just want walls, I want walls that contain the word fire in them to get like fire rated walls. The other thing about this is the reading data exchange. So what you do is you would get, this is using Dynamo Player to read the data exchange. And what you do is you go to your hub and you just copy that link, and then it can be an input into the Dynamo Player. And this is what that simple script that I just showed you guys looks like under the hood, where the data exchange URL is an input, the units are an input, and then the Boolean is an input. Yeah. And this is the stuff. So the other cool thing about the ACC model is now we can actually get information across hubs. And with Dynamo being so easy, it's a pretty nice entry to be able to extract a whole bunch of data across all your projects in the hub. So I'm excited to play around with that and see what we can do. And then this one is an example of that, where you're building the object filter, where you're saying, right, give me the stuff where the area equals this. And there's drop downs to make that kind of querying very easy. Yeah, so I think all this is kind of the big picture, right? I think we're getting to this interoperability age of the cloud, kind of this next level of the cloud. There was a nice video that I stumbled across with, you all know that guy, I hope. He talks about this. He actually talks about data exchange after this, and how that's how Autodesk is moving forward and where they see the industry moving forward. This is a quote from my friend over at Bird Tools, Mej. I think he nailed it in his description, where it's decentralized open data. So the decentralized is the key word there. right, where all these elements are stored in a database rather than being stored within a Revit file. Now, you don't have to share the whole Revit file, right? You just have to access the database. I think the traditional on PDFs, that's not great. These big bulky Revit models isn't great. I think this cloud way is kind of this middle new ground way. And honestly, kind of just trying to think about this in the future, like I see our projects being in the cloud and we pull, it grows and we pull from it in the life of the project. And then all of our different programs then become just these authoring tools. I don't think Revit's going anywhere, but it'll just be used in a little bit different way, where I use Revit, I pull stuff in that I need to do my stuff in Revit, and then I push out my results into the cloud model. I don't know if I'm right, who knows? But there's a lot of possibilities I could see, right? So you could do these fabrication stuff and then do energy modeling really quickly in Revit with testing out different facades and impacts. So you just push that stuff around. And then, yeah, I think there's some rippling effects. Autodesk, I think this came from Brian. He said Autodesk is positioned themselves to be the app store, the Apple app store of our industry, really, where a company like his has to build the platform on his. And is Autodesk going to take 30% out of his cut? Are they going to charge us for tokens? I mean, that's still up in the air. But yes, I think moving forward, all this is kind of the way that we can get better access to data.
Absolutely. That was fantastic.
Yes.
And I'm really excited, like you said, where the future is going to take us.
Yeah, and
We
I
have
don't even
1
know the
minute
answer,
left.
so
No,
I don't know if any of us do. I know Autodesk
none of us
does.
do, right? Who knows where AI will take us in things is going to be a really interesting. Hopefully, it will be a faster adoption than just Revit alone, right?
Right.
One last question in this last minute we have. Is there a special process for federal projects if you're going from Revit to Power Automate, since it's not FedRAMP with ACC?
I do not have the answer to that. That is
Okay.
above
That's a
my
tricky
pay
question.
grade. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
From our
Maybe somebody at Autodesk will know.
From the first conversations, it sounds like no. If I'm understanding the question right.
Well, thank you, Sean. Thank you so much